Justin Trudeau has been under fire for, I wish I could say days, weeks, or even months, but it seems to be years by now, and it's becoming more and more prominent. You're having daily and even weekly scandals, and it doesn't seem to end, especially when you have the corrupt mainstream media here in Canada that is taking a clear liberal bias side. But then on the other side of the coin, you have prominent figures such as Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, just to name a few, that are standing up and speaking out against this. And today we're going to be taking a look at Jordan Peterson specifically, who has quite a bit of criticism towards Justin Trudeau, and it's all very much warranted. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I want to encourage you all to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. We're on route to 400,000 subscribers. We're actually competing pretty well in terms of viewership and reach with the mainstream media here in Canada, which says a lot because they're government funded, and as per the mainstream media's CTV panel they had just the other week, I'm just a guy in my basement. So yeah, it says a lot. It seems like people are gravitating more towards the truth, which is good. It's good because we're actually making a difference, or we have the opportunity to make a difference politically here in Canada. And if you want one of these matching stickers like I have on my microphone, or like I have on my coffee mug here, the link for that is down in the description below. Without further ado, let's get into what Jordan Peterson has to say about Justin Trudeau. So we're going to start off pretty strong here on Twitter, or X rather. He said, "Wow, you're a scum rat." And he's talking about the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada, because the Liberals are trying to push a bill through that is going to censor online a little bit more in terms of like hate speech, which is, I mean, good, I suppose, but the issue that Canadians have, or that people have in general with this, is the confines of what hate speech is to be determined. It's up to the Liberals' interpretation of what that is, and that could include, but not limited to, even criticism of our own government. So nobody is going to disagree with protecting kids, and as you can see, he has in the hashtag here, protect kids online, which inherently is like a good idea, right? Like conservatives and people that are more on the right wing side of the political spectrum absolutely agree with protecting children. Liberals want to, push puberty blockers on like 9-year-olds, right? So it's good, but the limitations are to be determined. So here's kind of the video that they've posted. CBC, saying unprecedented tensions lead to staggering hate crime increase, says the Toronto police chief. Pride Toronto says hate speech against trans community is on the rise following Poilievre's comments on female bathrooms. So there's a really big slanderous and defamatory push from the mainstream media towards any criticism of this kind of woke plague that's taking over. Toronto police increased size of hate crime unit amid rise of reports of hate. Young people more than exposed to online hate than national average. And so it's just a short little video here of all the different, by the Attorney General here, of all the different types of media, mainstream media headlines that involve hate speech. We're going to segue just for a moment here. We got a tweet from Wall Street Silver, their post on X. I guess you can't call it a tweet anymore. It says Five Guys prices are out of control, and this is obviously due to inflation. But don't worry, folks, inflation is under control. And speaking out of under control, you've got the Conservatives that are really cracking down on kind of the wokeness. They've taken a stance, and you've seen this in recent videos that I've posted where Pierre Poilievre came out just after the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, saying that, we're going to put a block, or we're going to put rules and regulations around puberty blockers and gender transitions and all that stuff on minors, which is great. It's absolutely great. And so here's a National Post article that Jordan Peterson wrote. He's Jordan Peterson, the awe-inspiring conservative counter-offensive against woke nonsense. From Pierre Poilievre to Danielle Smith, Canadian Conservatives are finally pushing back against the snakes. And that's incredible. And you saw for a very long time that this kind of went this was in silence. And a lot of people, a lot of conservatives, to any denomination of the spectrum, whether you're like center right or far right, whatever it is, a lot of people had a problem with this because the liberals are very much pushing for, kids, minors, right, to not have rules and regulations around this woke nonsense. We can have a 10-year-old that starts taking puberty blockers, and that's not protecting kids. You need to protect the kids, right? So let's take a look at what Jordan Peterson wrote. I have worked with people of many political stripes now in many different countries in Europe, Southeast Asia, the UK, the US, and Canada. This has provided me with the luxury of accurate comparative judgment and comparison. Something is brewing in Canada, something of deeper than mere national significance. It's a veritable sign of the times, just as our nation was, and so unfortunately, on the cutting edge of the moralizing, woke, globalist, eco-utopian nonsense, oh so charismatically by the beautiful Justin Trudeau. So we are leading the charge of counter-offensive, which is amazing. And a lot of people had a lot of positive things to say about Pierre Poilievre coming out and essentially taking a hard stance on that. And I believe it was backed by, I don't know if it was backed by Joe Rogan, but I think it was backed by Jordan Peterson. Now we got a clip of Jordan Peterson and Bill Maher talking about why Justin Trudeau is so bad. And I'm sure down in the comments, if you guys want to take this time to let me know why you think Justin Trudeau is so bad before I click play on this video, and then we can kind of compare our notes and opinions on what Bill Maher and Jordan Peterson have to say about this.
The quote was about protests in general. It was something like, we have a vibrant democracy here in Canada and we value protests. But it was something like, but when you use protest to protest, to object to the policies of the government, I think you're going too far. Well, what the fuck is protest for, except to object to the policies of the government?
It was quite shocking, everything that happened in that protest, because they seized the bank accounts of 200 Canadians, and that was not amusing. And Trudeau has no idea what that did to Canada's international reputation. That was not a good precedent.
Okay, wait, go back. Mm-hmm. They seized the bank accounts of what, people who were in the protest?
They seized some bank accounts of some people who only sent money to the protest, like through Give, Send, Go, and GoFundMe and so forth. So.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So you didn't even have to be at the protest.
When you say seized, they froze it. They didn't take their money. They just froze it. So they
froze their credit cards, they froze their mortgage payments, they locked them out. So they locked them out of the financial system entirely.
That is creepy.
It's really bad. In fact, one of the banks actually apologized. There's 5 big banks in Canada, and one of them actually apologized for doing it eventually. They all should have apologized, but one did. Yeah, it was really bad. It was shocking. Canadians aren't sufficiently shocked about it, partly because they don't really understand what that did to Canada's international reputation. But
it made us look like absolute fools. It made us comparable to the Chinese communist dictatorship regime. And it doesn't help that you have the leader of our country, Justin Trudeau, who's come out in the past and openly supported, or rather admired, the communist dictatorship and regime of China.
It was absolutely, I can't imagine a politician doing anything more inappropriate than that. Right? No trial, no real investigation. Plus, Trudeau claimed that the trucker convoy was financed by MAGA, Republican Americans, which is completely preposterous because, first of all, why would MAGA Republican Americans foment dissent in Ottawa? Like, even if they knew where it was, which they don't, and they don't care, and why would they? And so, first of all, it was the Russians. It's like, oh yes, that's the Russians' primary concern. And then it was like literally MAGA Republican Americans funding the trucker protests in Ottawa. It was so
and
ridiculous.
they were protesting vaccine mandates?
Yeah, essentially. But they were protesting the lockdowns more broadly, I would say. Yeah. And because it was really hard on them. It was hard. Well, obviously, you were locked down. You know how fun that was.
We did real time right from this room for about 6 months. I did the monologue standing over there. And
it was a monumental time in Canadian history. And it's something that Canadians and the world will not really ever forget or forgive. The totalitarian mindset and what happened during that convoy and since the convoy is inexcusable, and that's why we need drastic change. That's why we need to share videos like this so more people, even normies, right? If you're consuming this content weekly or daily, chances are you already know who you're going to vote for, and you're probably not going to veer off that path. But the normies that are consuming YouTube, right, or some sort of social media platforms content, they need to be aware of what's happening and the incompetence and the repercussions of voting idiots into power, people that don't know how to manage our money, people that are power hungry, people that take orders from organizations such as the World Economic Forum that don't have the best interests of Canadians at heart. And that's very, very clear, yet somehow there's a lot of people that still support that because they think it's some conspiracy, right? So we need to break that glass for them and show people, normies, the truth of what's happening and ease them into it. It was a pretty big moment when I got essentially red pilled, and I still kind of remember that of like, oh, our government, I was in the military, and our government is not doing what's in the best interest of Canadians, and they're abusing their power. And we've been told here in Canada that you just have to trust the government and you have to trust the policies and you can't question things because then you're a nut job. And that's just not the truth. It's good to think about things for yourself and come to your own conclusion. And well, speaking of more controversies, we're going to wrap this up with the latest and greatest controversy of how the RCMP or how Trudeau obstructed criminal investigation into himself. And this is the words of RCMP, our federal policing here in Canada. This is absolutely insane. It's the hottest topic in Canada, and it's very sad that you have somebody who's just constantly in a state of immunity, essentially.
Mr. Chair, thank you to the witness. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. A part of the RCMP's examination to determine whether the Prime Minister violated Section 139, Sub 2 of the Criminal Code by committing obstruction of justice, correct? That was part of the RCMP's examination.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And paragraph 19 of the RCMP investigation report states that the strongest theory towards an offense of obstruction of justice was that the Prime Minister shuffled Jody Wilson-Raybould out of the position of Attorney General so that a new Attorney General would make a different decision regarding the prosecution of SNC Lavalin, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And it's fair to say that the RCMP did not have access to all material evidence surrounding Ms. Wilson-Raybould being shuffled out as Attorney General, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And so, just to clarify then, or emphasize, the RCMP did not have access to all material evidence on the strongest theory surrounding the Prime Minister's potential criminality involving obstruction of justice, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
And the reason the RCMP did not have access to that material evidence on what was central to determining whether the Prime Minister broke the law was because of the parameters of the scope of the Order of Council with respect to the waiver of cabinet confidentiality, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The parameters did not allow us to fully look into this one. However, I should just add...
Thank you for that. You answered it. The parameters did not allow you to get that evidence. Now, there is one person who had the authority to expand the parameters of that Order in Council, and that is the Prime Minister himself, correct?
I would have to say, Mr. Chair, I'm not exactly sure of the exact process of where the Prime Minister would be involved in such a decision. However, I do believe the decision has to be made within the somewhere within the government.
I would submit the decision would have to be made by the Prime Minister, but the RCMP went and requested an expansion of the scope to obtain that evidence, to follow that evidence, correct?
Before we proceeded with the assessment, yes, we did make a request for an expansion to the parameters.
I would just add, Mr. Cooper, it was not to follow the evidence, it's to glean additional information. That could be evidence.
Correct. And that request was turned down on August 30th, 2019.
I would have to say, Mr. Chair, that the request for the expansion was not allowed.
It was turned down, and it was turned down by the PCO of the Prime Minister's Department, correct?
Mr. Chair, we did receive a letter from the Department of Justice. I could not remember exactly, specifically, if this came from the...
Well, it was from the PCO, and that's in the RCMP's investigation report. And would it be fair to say that the refusal by the Prime Minister's personal department, the PCO, to expand the scope of the Order in Council significantly impeded the full investigation into the Prime Minister's potential obstruction of justice?
It limited our capability of pursuing a full investigation.
And it would have limited it in a fairly significant way. Because after all, we're talking about going to the heart of the matter of obstruction.
And again, I don't know what additional, not knowing what additional information is out there, it's hard for me to speculate that there's a Pandora box out there which is full of information, so it's hard for us without speculating.
Well, let the record show that the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, obstructed the RCMP investigation into the Prime Minister's potential obstruction of justice. Are you aware of any other Canadian who can single-handedly block the RCMP from investigating his own criminality in such an effective way as the Prime Minister?
Good question. Fantastic. I wouldn't use the term, Mr. President, I wouldn't use the term block. The RCMP is, when it runs an investigation, it operates within the parameters and the regulations that we're allowed to. And we see international security investigation as well, where there's some information that we don't have access to, we can't use into an investigation. So it's the parameters. It's the parameters that we are.
I think so.
But recent information has just come out that he did, in fact, block, allegedly, the RCMP from conducting their investigation. He stopped them. The coalition has stopped them. It's the most corrupt thing that you've seen in, I wish I could say Canadian history, but it just seems to be every week Trudeau one-ups his own corruption. And Canadians are pissed off and fed up with this, including myself.
I think the answer to that question is there is no one who has such powers. And was any explanation provided by the Prime Minister's personal department why there was this refusal to expand the scope of the Order in Council?
Again, Mr. Chair, as far as for a response on this one, of course, it was indicated, of course, the importance, of course, of these privileges that do exist. They are there for a reason, and again, as the Commissioner mentioned, we do have to operate within these parameters.
It would seem to me to be part of a pattern of a cover-up.
That's right.
That's what it would seem to me to be. How can the Prime Minister be subject to the rule of law, like every other Canadian, if his personal department can shield him from an RCMP criminal investigation?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chair, I'll let individuals draw their own conclusion. What I come back to is we operate within a set of regulations and parameters that, unfortunately, we made the effort to go and get additional information, and it was refused.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Two-tier
Thank
system
you.
of justice, I would say.
Thank you.
It is so incredibly corrupt, and something needs to happen. And unfortunately, nothing will happen until the inevitable change of government, because the people are fed up. And I think most Canadians can agree with this, that we need to make sure that this doesn't repeat itself ever again, where the Prime Minister holds so much power that he can actually, or she or they, them, or whichever denomination or pronoun you want to use for any future Prime Minister, can't block themselves from being investigated thoroughly and by the book like Justin Trudeau has. So this is a lesson to be learned, unfortunately, that just because someone's offering to legalize marijuana in a country doesn't mean that you should vote them in, because maybe somebody else could do that same thing for way less of a cost than what Trudeau has caused this country and the taxpayers and all of our well-being. Since we're going to end today's video, folks, I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. I look forward to reading them. On your way out, I'd like to encourage you all to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.